Hi, and welcome to the first ever Creative Minds Speed Panel, where I'm joined by three amazing guests who I'm going to let introduce themselves here in a moment. Today we are going to be talking to you about maintaining personal health and well-being while pursuing the audience. How do you grow an audience and not die in the process is effectively the question that I have today. We're going to start with Mike here. Would you guys mind introducing yourselves one at a time, and then I'll jump right in?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Michael R. Underwood, speculative fiction author. The Re-Raise Urban Fantasy series and the forthcoming Genrenauts, a series of novellas about interdimensional storytellers who fix broken stories to protect their world. I'm also the sales and marketing manager for Angry Robot Books.
Fantastic.
My name is Carrie Patel. I'm the author of The Buried Life and Cities and Thrones, and I'm also a narrative designer at Obsidian Entertainment.
My name is Gregory Wilson. I'm a college professor at St. John's University, teach courses in fantasy and science fiction and creative writing, and an author with a graphic novel coming out and a new series coming out next year from the Ed Greenwood Group, and run a podcast called Speculate that interviews and talks about authors and people like that. And Mike has just joined up with us, actually, on Speculate too. And I run a Twitch TV channel also.
Which is going to be fantastic for exactly what we're talking about. What we're all authors of one variety or another. We're all trying to find people to read and enjoy and love our work, we hope.
Yep.
But we have to find those people. The question that I thought I'd start out with, just as kind of a teaser, what activity in audience building do you find to be the most beneficial, and what do you find to be the most frustrating? Carrie, let's start with you.
Well, so I've started going to conventions now for a couple of years, and I've found that I really, really enjoy that because it just puts a human face on kind of all the interactions that we all have otherwise by email or via Twitter.
Yep.
And I think the first few are always hard because you walk into a room where everybody else knows each other and you know nobody. But I noticed that like each convention it gets a little easier and a lot more fun as you start to make friends and start to reconnect with people. So that's definitely been the most enjoyable. Twitter maybe is the more frustrating one for me. Like, there are things I like about it, but I end up feeling either like I'm doing way too much of it or I'm just not doing enough. And it's another one of those things that I think until you've gotten comfortable, until you've met people on it, you sort of see these conversations happening and you're like, how do I jump in?
Right.
You know, am I just going to be inane?
No.
And you know, you feel like you spend a lot of time reading other people's conversations that you're like, what am I really getting out of this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's good. Greg?
Yeah, the most useful one has been pretty easy for me over the last couple of years, and it's this Twitch channel, which I didn't think would be the case because I did it as kind of I was looking for something for background when I was grading final exams, honestly. And I started doing it, and it turned out to be this really very, very powerful sort of marketing tool that I hadn't realized it would be initially, because of the nature of it, where you're constantly building social connections and you have a community of people that come back, your regulars that want to watch you playing these games and interact with you, and I make it a very clearly story and narrative based game thing, so I do a lot of stuff based on that. So I did stuff like I actually had Josh Sawyer on, we talked about this, and I actually interviewed him, and then later I interviewed Carrie Patel and didn't realize that Carrie was the same Carrie Patel that did, I was like, oh wait, all these worlds collide. But so it's been really, really useful in terms of, by far the best thing I've ever done promotionally, to be able to get people involved in me as, I hate to use this term, as a brand, like knowing me as a person and wanting to be getting stuff from me, whatever I write, because they like my writing, also because they like me. So Twitch has been very useful for that, and I couldn't be happier with that, although I do like conferences and conventions. Twitch has really been very, very big on that score. As far as the most frustrating, probably, honestly, it's been my own blog, and I think the reason is just I don't have time. Like, I realized the other day I have a publicist whose name is Melanie Metters that I hired recently, who's great. And she was doing this analysis. She's like, I noticed you haven't updated your blog and I was expecting, she's like a couple days, for a couple of months. And I'm like, oh my God, really? And I was like, I haven't updated it for a couple of months because I'm so busy. Like, I'm writing and I'm doing this stuff and I am on Twitter sometimes. And and at a certain point I decided that I don't know that my return on investment, she said in the process, she said, you don't need to do one. Like, you could easily reach all the people you need to reach through Facebook, through Twitter, through, direct face-to-face communications like conventions, through the Twitch stuff. She's like, it's not like you have a very good online presence. You can have a great website without having it. And I was like, really? Like, I don't have to put something new every day? Really? Please? So I may end up thinking that the blog is the most frustrating one, and I wouldn't have said that because I thought I had the most control over it. But man, the constant use of content that you have to be developing, I'd rather put that energy towards my worlds rather than into writing on my page, and who knows how many people are reading it. So
Great. Mike?
I think for me, the one that has been most productive, I was going over this as you were asking, is probably just being on podcasts. It's not necessarily only co-hosting, but going on Speculate as a guest or as a guest host and appearing on the Roundtable podcast. And like I jokingly refer to like my podcast world domination plan.
Oh yeah.
Because I think in every sphere, every media, or every category has its own community. And if I go both deep and wide in podcasting, I have a lot of fun because it's just talking with people. And I can always make time. I can make an hour or two in a week when I know that I'm doing a lot of other things because I get to be social because I work at home. And my fiance goes and works in an office all day and then comes back. And it's an extra way for me to talk to people. And I get to have my opinions out there, and I get to kind of stay current on things. And now I'm co-hosting 2 shows, and I'm also trying to appear on other ones, and it's really been rewarding. I have a lot of people who come back and be like, "Oh yeah, I heard you on this show," and then being on one show gets me on another show, and it just builds.
Yep.
The one that's most frustrating is probably Facebook, because partially because it's still effective. And if it weren't effective, I could
just
get
forget
rid
about
of
it.
it. Yeah, because I have, at a certain point, I stopped having my Facebook be entirely personal, and my writing went on there, and I started accepting friend requests from people who I had never met in person, who knew people, and now my Facebook page is this weird hybrid of personal and professional, but I get such high engagement, not just from friends, but the people talking to each other in that, because I can control it really nicely, and ideally, I'd be able to get rid of my Facebook, but it's yielded too much, and it's a space where people come to talk to me when I'm talking, and I feel like I need to respond to that. So it's a kind of a devil that I've made my bed and I have to lie in it with it.
Yeah.
And that's a good piece of advice to start with. If you ever find a devil, don't make your bed to lie with that devil. For me, I'm really enjoying the convention scene right now. I'm new to it and really enjoying it. I found that there's been a lot of benefits. I've met all of you guys. That's how I'm actually making Twitter fun, because it really wasn't that much fun before that, but now it's getting there. And I resonate with everything you guys have said, especially my blogging. That's one of the big reasons I do Infinite Tangent is because I can't blog. I'll write a fake story and then that'll be my blog, So I totally resonate with that. So as all of you are trying to use these, and especially in talking about the frustration and feeling like you have to use Facebook, feeling like you have to use Twitter, you can forget your blog apparently. Yes. So you're the winner of today's competition. Yeah, door prize on the way out. How do you pursue these things and kind of fish to see what's going to be effective, and in that process hopefully find something but not spread yourself too thin, not get yourself to that place where you are frustrated or burning out or hating life, hating the platforms you're using? What do you do to keep that balance?
A fair number of platforms now have gotten to the point where they don't feel like work anymore. Twitter is sometimes work, but it literally counts for work for my day job because there's so much that all of our authors are doing, and I magnify that and contribute and enable conversations there. And I've built enough up on Twitter that I don't feel like, oh man, I got to go do some Twittering now. It's just an organic part of the way that I live online. And with Twitter and with other things, there's a certain level of forwardness and a certain level that I hold things back on. And I've been defining, I mostly try to be more positive on Twitter unless it's like a social justice issue. And I've I've kind of settled on that as the situation. When I'm trying something new, I generally try one new platform and I spend a good chunk of time working in it and trying to figure out what it's about. And so I'm only adding one thing at a time, in addition to what I'm doing across other platforms. And I make Facebook viable just by, I've developed more willpower to walk away from terrible conversations. A friend of a friend has come in to yell at me because I posted something political on my own Facebook, and they're like, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, you can just go away, and then I'm going to stop this thread. And it makes life so much easier.
Makes sense.
I think when I'm being most effective and most content on social media, it's when I have a bit of a schedule. And it's when I've got a good rhythm with my writing, and I can say, okay, well, when I start my writing session in the morning, I spend 15-20 minutes, see what's going on Twitter, Facebook, get engaged, then write. And then maybe around lunchtime or so, check in, do the same thing, and then maybe at the end of the day as well. And I feel like it's easy to either think to either feel the need to do too much, or to feel like, well, it's just worthless because I don't even know where to start or where to stop. And so I feel like setting a schedule and saying, okay, here's some social media time, let's see what we do, and now let's get back to the writing.
So you guys actually do almost the exact opposite, where he's integrated it into his life to the point that he actually almost doesn't exist in the real world anymore. You hear. You're actually setting yourself specific time that you want to just set aside, and then you can forget about it.
Pretty much.
Has that worked for you?
I think so. It's always interesting. Like, I see a lot of people that I'm friends with who always seem to jump into every conversation, and I'm always impressed, but I don't think I have the ability to divide my attention that way. Mm-hmm. And so I'm either following conversations or I'm doing my writing. But to be perfectly honest, if I'm under pressure, if I've got a lot of stuff going on, my social media is the first thing to go. And so I'll drop off for a week or maybe two.
That actually brings up a really good question. I wanted to see if you had any thoughts first, though.
Yeah, and I think it's probably, for me, it's sort of a mix in that certain aspects of social media don't get scheduled, and I think Twitter, for me, is the perfect example of something that I can sometimes be very engaged in, or sometimes not at all, because the nature of the medium is such that it's sort of a in and out type of thing. The thing I have to be careful about is not to only be tweeting things when stuff that's important about my work is coming out, because then I become that guy who spams his own work and things like that. So I don't want to do that. But I often find that I have enough interesting people that I follow on, both in the gaming worlds and in the writing worlds now, where I'm able to sort of interact with them at different points and at different moments, and sometimes just have to, I had a crazy discussion with Justin Landon over about the Super Bowl, and he was asking about who the hell the Red Hot Chili Peppers were, and I was like, "Are you drunk? How do you not know?" And he was just like, "Well," and that was hilarious and funny. Of course, I wouldn't have known Justin if I didn't know things through writing and so on. So Twitter's perfect for that, and that's not scheduled. But my Twitch show is scheduled. I stream Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday nights, and usually, except for when I'm at places like World Fantasy, but I normally am on those 3 days, and I have pretty much a set time where I'm coming on and when I'm getting off usually, and that for the most part is very helpful. First of all, it helps to build a viewer base, mm-hmm. but also it's time that I know is sort of cordoned out of my schedule. And in terms of headspace, I like to have things do double duty. So I brand myself as an author in everything that I do, as a writer in everything as I do. So everything is about story and narrative. So the games that I play tend to be story and narrative based games, which is the reason that I was talking about Pillars of Eternity, right? Because it was an RPG, and I'm interested in stories and narrative, and I can present myself that way. And I also write story and narrative, and I teach story and narrative. And so even I play in a progressive rock band, and I'm writing the lyrics because I'm writing story and narrative. Everything is in that sort of melded, I think, and it makes it a lot easier schedule-wise when I know that stuff is always going to be serving one of those purposes, which is to advance me as a storyteller in some way.
That's good. Also, speaking of regularly tuning into things, be sure to tune in to the Creative Minds podcast, the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at, I think, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So off of that, I was going to ask you brought up a really good point, which is dropping things. Because sometimes you get too much, I'm in a place where I'm doing too much. And so approaching the idea of dropping things, how do you prioritize? It's almost like an inverse prioritization, but how do you say, okay, this is my lowest priority and I'm going to drop it first? And how do you say, these are things that though they're killing me, I need to actually make sure that I keep doing no matter what?
It probably depends on what Mike was saying before about the level of engagement. If you're in a position where you know that everyone connects with you on Facebook, as an example, you've probably got to grit your teeth and just deal to the extent possible. But there are clearly things where you try every single social media platform, and I'll talk to people on panels about this sometimes, where people are like, well, should I be involved in Snapchat and Instagram, and they just start firing out these things, and what about this following 6 things, and these instant messages, and these forums, and at a certain point, you have to say, you really, broadening your exposure to a place where there really aren't very many people that are interested in hearing you is not a valuable use of your time, in the hope that you might touch someone who could maybe do X. That's way too much speculation happening. So So most of the time, I think it depends on the things that are really bringing in the most sort of value in terms of engagement and connection, and the stuff that's tied in mostly to what you would be doing anyway. So for me, the further afield the social media is from what I would normally do, the less likely it is going to be useful to me in terms of my time investment into it, and the more frustrating it is for me to kind of deal with it, which is why, as I said, the blog is kind of taking me away from things, because I don't know that many people come to my site for that. They come to my site to find out about my schedule and other things, and they can interact with me in many different ways, but they're not going to necessarily read my blog, and I don't want to write it, So it's taking me away from the, again, I hate to use the term, the brand that I want to represent myself as. So part of the priority is how much engagement are you getting through that particular social media venue.
I think it's also just, look at what comes most naturally. I like browsing Instagram or Tumblr every once in a while, but I know I wouldn't really, at this point anyway, have much to do with it myself. Whereas now on Twitter and on Facebook, I'm interacting with people I know, and joining conversations with people I've met. And so, those are easier to kind of jump on and off when needed. But I guess as far as dropping things, at the end of the day, I have a full-time job, so that obviously has to come first. I'm a writer, so that I also have to make time for. And the social media, in my mind anyway, supports my writing, and I need that audience. But first and foremost, I need to be able to, produce my product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, a lot is schedule dependent, and it's not just my own writing schedule and career schedule, but what is happening with my day job. Because I do a lot of social media activity during that. If it's this Tuesday where we just had 2 new books out, I need to be on Twitter and Facebook, and I need to be following those writers whose books are new out and make sure that I'm catching reviews and signal boosting those, because that's a part of the day job that pays for me to be able to do everything. I think I'm a bit like Greg in that blogging is something that falls off for me. I used to do a lot of blogging. It was one of the primary ways that I got kind of my thoughts about things out. And now I have podcasting and I have Twitter and I have a lot of other ways of conveying that. And I have more fun being on a podcast, 3 weeks out of 4 than I do in sitting down and spending an hour doing a blog for the most part. But it all still is really contextually dependent, because like this week there was a ton of publishing news and like digital media and content news, so I had tons of opinions. It was like, okay, the best way of getting these opinions out right away is blogging, because I don't want to do a 50 tweet stream because it's going to be more coherent. So a lot is really just riding the tides of what's happening and knowing what I'm getting less out of and what I'm getting more out of.
Yeah, enjoyment level, by the way, is really important. Being able to enjoy what you're doing, because I have a blast when I stream, and I have a blast coming to conventions and conferences. I really, really love it. So that's going to come through, right? And if I'm having to sit there and be like, what picture can I take to put on Instagram? It's going to come across as inauthentic and disingenuous, and you're not going to be able to communicate what you really are authentically to an audience. So if anything, you'd be hurting yourself in that regard. So enjoyment also has to come into it too.
So in a way, it sounds like you should pursue what it is that is already organically going to come to you.
Yeah, which is what Carrie brought up too, that idea about what comes naturally is part of it also.
Yeah. Satisfaction is a word that came to mind when I was listening to you. Just that idea that when you're done with it, you're like, yeah, that was good.
Yep.
Not like pulling teeth and being like, oh, God, I don't know energy.
Oh, God, why?
Yeah. It was there was a chunk of time I was like, all right, I'm going to blog at least twice a week. And sometimes it was very easy because I had plenty of things to say, and other times it was like, what other thing haven't I talked about recently that I can talk about on this thing? And it becomes a lot harder to do.
Yeah, right.
Like going into a blog tour, if you set yourself a bunch of topics and you're getting terrible interview questions that are really boring, like it's so much harder to trudge through versus a really good prompt or a really good interview.
Yep.
It's all flow state and getting to the end of it and having more energy, or at least as much energy, instead of being drained.
Yep.
Makes sense. So as we wrap up here, do you guys have any final words of wisdom for people that are trying to keep their heads above water while building an audience?
Prioritize, enjoy, as much as possible, do, as I say, double duty. Try to make one thing stand for two things. Try to make everything connected to a central narrative about who you are. In my case as a writer, the more that you can do that and present yourself as a sort of unified figure that communicates in these things that you enjoy communicating in, the better, I think.
I think find a sense of community, whether that's going to conventions, whether that's becoming part of your local writing groups. I think, the best content comes out of conversations, and I think it's very easy to kind of type away in the dark of the night, feeling like you're talking to no one. But I feel like it's, building relationships, having conversations, and feeling like you're a part of a community and not just one loudspeaker out of many.
Definitely.
That makes it interesting and meaningful to others as well as to yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, I think for me, finding a way of being engaged that's also self-care, where like I don't get to see people as much, so something where I get to be social is really valuable to me. So it's double counting, but one of the ways that it's counting is in terms of mental health.
Yeah.
So that it makes it really, really viable for me.
Yep, definitely.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sitting in on what I guess is the first Creative Minds Speed podcast. Feel free to throw us any wisdom anytime you have, and that's all we have.